I walked out of that building with nothing but my personal items in a cardboard box. 3 weeks later, I walked back in as their biggest client's new representative. The look on my ex-boss's face was worth every sleepless night. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more workplace revenge stories that will make your day. I never thought I'd be grateful for being fired, but life has a funny way of turning disasters into opportunities. My name is Audrey Bennett, and for 6 years I dedicated my life to Pinnacle Ventures, one of the top management consulting firms in Chicago. I worked 80-hour weeks, sacrificed holidays with family, and poured my heart into building relationships with our clients. By 32, I'd become the youngest senior consultant in the company's history. The Kessler Group was my biggest achievement, a global retail corporation with a portfolio worth over $500 million in annual consulting needs. I'd personally secured their contract 3 years ago when they were considering moving to our competitors. The CEO, Martin Kessler, had specifically requested me as their account manager after I presented a revolutionary supply chain overhaul that saved them $78 million in the first year alone. "Audrey, you have a way of seeing opportunities where others see problems," Martin had told me during our celebration dinner. "That's why we trust Pinnacle, because they have you." A little did I know those words would become ironically prophetic. The first sign of trouble came when Richard Donovan took over as our division head. He was old school in the worst ways, the type who believed in mandatory 7 a.m. meetings and tracked bathroom breaks. He also happened to be best friends with our CEO, which explained his rapid ascent despite mediocre performance reviews. "Bennett, I need to see you in my office," Richard called one Tuesday morning, his voice carrying across the open floor plan. I grabbed my tablet and followed him, already mentally preparing for another critique about how my collaborative approach with clients wasn't directive enough. It was an ongoing disagreement. I believed in partnerships while Richard preferred to tell clients what they needed whether they liked it or not. His office was immaculate in that sterile corporate way, awards and diplomas strategically placed for maximum visibility, a desk clear except for a single folder and his laptop. "Close the door," he said, not looking up from his screen. I did, then took a seat without being asked. Small rebellions were how I maintained my sanity. "I've been reviewing our team structure," he began, finally meeting my eyes with that empty corporate stare. "And I've decided we need to make some changes to better serve our clients." "I'm all ears," I said, though the knot forming in my stomach suggested I already knew where this was heading. "We're bringing in someone with fresh perspective to handle the Kessler account. I think you've gotten too comfortable with them." The statement hit like a physical blow. Kessler was my account. I'd built that relationship from nothing. "Comfortable," I repeated, fighting to keep my voice steady. Martin Kessler specifically requested me as their point person last quarter. Their satisfaction ratings are at 98%. Richard waved his hand dismissively. "Sometimes clients don't know what's best for them. We need someone who can push them toward more profitable service packages." "You mean upsell them things they don't need?" His eyes narrowed. "I mean maximize value for both parties. My cousin Daniel is joining us from Westbrook Consulting. He has an aggressive approach that I think will benefit the Kessler relationship." And there it was. I wasn't being replaced because of performance issues. I was being replaced by nepotism. "Your cousin," I stated flatly. "And what happens to me?" Richard slid the folder across his desk. "We're restructuring your role. You'll be heading up our small business division. It's a lateral move." I didn't touch the folder. The small business division was where careers went to die. Local clients with minimal budgets and no growth potential. It wasn't a lateral move. It was a demotion designed to make me quit. "What if I refuse?" Richard leaned back, the picture of corporate indifference. "Then we'll have to discuss separation terms. The decision has been made, Audrey. This transition happens next week." I left his office in a fog of disbelief and rage. 6 years of loyalty, countless weekends sacrificed, relationships strained, all tossed aside for someone's cousin. The unfairness of it burned through me as I returned to my desk, where I sat staring at my screen, unable to focus on anything. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Kessler Quarterly Strategy Meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. The meeting I'd prepared for extensively, where I was supposed to present our plan for their international expansion. Would I still be expected to do that, knowing I was being removed from the account right after? The rest of the day passed in a blur. Colleagues sensed something was wrong but knew better than to ask. In consulting, showing weakness was career suicide. So I plastered on my professional mask and pretended everything was fine while researching employment lawyers on my phone under my desk. That evening, I stayed late, waiting until most people had left. Then I downloaded every document I had legally created for the Kessler account. My presentations, the templates I'd developed, the workflow systems I'd designed. These were my intellectual property according to my contract, tools I'd created to serve my clients better. As I was gathering these files, my phone rang. Martin Kessler's name flashed on the screen. "Martin," I answered, trying to sound normal. "What can I do for you?" "Audrey, just checking if we're still on for drinks after tomorrow's meeting. Sophia is flying in from London and wants to discuss the European rollout with you personally." Sophia was Martin's daughter and the head of their international division. She'd specifically requested my involvement in their European expansion. "About that," I began, then paused. Should I tell him I was being removed from his account? Would that be unprofessional? Or did I owe him the courtesy of the truth after 3 years of partnership? "Everything okay?" Martin asked, concern evident in his voice. "Actually, no." I decided honesty was the best policy. "I've just been informed that I'll no longer be handling the Kessler account after this week. Pinnacle is assigning someone new, Daniel Donovan." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought we'd been disconnected. "Martin? I'm here," he finally responded, his tone noticeably cooler. "And you were going to tell me this when, exactly?" "I just found out today. I was planning to discuss it with you after tomorrow's meeting." Another pause. "Cancel the meeting. If you're not going to be our contact going forward, there's no point. We'll reschedule when your replacement reaches out." The call ended before I could respond, leaving me standing alone in the empty office, the final pieces of my professional life crumbling around me. The next morning, I arrived to find Richard waiting at my desk, his face flushed with anger. "What did you say to Martin Kessler?" he demanded without preamble. I set down my coffee with deliberate calm. I told him the truth, that I was being removed from his account. "He canceled tomorrow's meeting, and he's requesting a call with the CEO," Richard hissed, keeping his voice low as other employees began filtering in. "That sounds like a problem for my replacement to handle," I replied evenly. Richard's complexion darkened further. "Clear out your desk. You're done here." "You're firing me? On what grounds?" "Insubordination, interfering with client relationships. I'll have HR prepare your final paycheck." I looked around at the office I'd called home for 6 years, at the colleagues turning away to avoid witnessing my humiliation, and made a decision that would change everything. "Fine," I said, pulling out the cardboard box I'd presciently placed under my desk the night before. "But my non-compete only applies to termination with cause, which this isn't. You might want to remind your cousin of that when he's struggling to understand why Kessler is so upset." I packed my things with deliberate slowness, my awards, my personal office supplies, the small plant my mother had given me when I was promoted. Richard stood watching, his breathing gradually calming as he probably realized that firing me might have been an overreaction. "Audrey," he finally said, his tone shifting to that fake conciliatory voice executives use when they've made a mistake. "Perhaps we can discuss a transition plan that would be more amenable to—" "Too late," I cut him off, picking up my box. "I'll have my lawyer contact HR about my severance. Goodbye, Richard." I walked out of Pinnacle Ventures that day with my head held high, despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. In the elevator down to the lobby, I allowed myself one moment of weakness, a single tear that I quickly wiped away. This wasn't the end, I told myself. This was just the beginning of something new. I just didn't know what that something was yet. The first week of unemployment hit harder than I expected. Despite my confident exit, the reality of having no job, no income, and a suddenly uncertain future weighed heavily. My downtown apartment, once a symbol of my success, now felt like an extravagance I couldn't afford. Each morning, I woke up with that momentary amnesia where everything seemed normal, followed by the crushing remembrance that my career had imploded. But wallowing wouldn't pay the bills. By day 3, I had updated my resume, contacted recruiters, and started reaching out to my network, everyone except Kessler Group contacts. Something held me back from leveraging that relationship immediately. Professional pride, perhaps? Or maybe just the raw hurt of having been discarded so easily after years of loyalty. On day 5, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Audrey Bennett speaking," I answered, reverting to my professional tone out of habit. "Ms. Bennett, this is Sophia Kessler." My heart skipped. Sophia was not only Martin's daughter, but a formidable businesswoman in her own right, having taken their European operations from struggling to thriving in under 2 years. "Sophia, hello. This is unexpected." "Not really," she replied, her British education evident in her crisp consonants. "We had a rather interesting meeting with your replacement yesterday. Dad suggested I call you afterward." I moved to my kitchen counter, pulling out a notepad. "I'm no longer with Pinnacle, as you know. Precisely why I'm calling. This Daniel person spent our entire meeting explaining how our current strategy is all wrong and how we need to invest in services that, coincidentally, would triple our consulting spend." Her tone was dry enough to dehydrate the Atlantic. When Dad mentioned the supply chain restructuring you'd implemented, Daniel dismissed it as shallow cost-cutting that sacrifices long-term growth. Despite everything, I felt a surge of indignation. That supply chain restructuring had been revolutionary, maintaining quality while eliminating redundancies. "That's an interesting perspective," I managed diplomatically. "It's a garbage perspective," Sophia replied bluntly. Dad walked out of the meeting. "Our contract with Pinnacle is up for renewal next month, and frankly, we're considering our options. Are you bound by a non-compete?" The question caught me off guard. "Not in this case. My termination doesn't activate the non-compete clause." "Excellent. Are you free for dinner tonight?" "The Oak Room at 7. I'm in town until tomorrow." Before I could properly process what was happening, I'd agreed and ended the call, staring at my phone in bewilderment. Was Sophia Kessler offering me a job? Or just seeking information about Pinnacle's inner workings? I spent the afternoon oscillating between hope and anxiety, finally settling on a charcoal gray dress that projected confidence without trying too hard. The Oak Room was one of Chicago's premier restaurants, where business deals were negotiated over $200 steaks and $500 bottles of wine. Sophia was already seated when I arrived, her platinum blonde hair cut in a precise bob that framed her striking features. At 38, she had the poised confidence that came from growing up in wealth but proving herself independently. "Audrey," she stood to greet me, her handshake firm. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "Thank you for the invitation," I replied, taking the seat across from her. "Though I admit I'm curious about its purpose." Sophia smiled, appreciating my directness. "I've always liked that about you. No time wasted on corporate niceties." She signaled the waiter, who promptly brought over a bottle of wine. "I assume you're fielding offers already?" "I'm exploring options," I said carefully. "Let me be direct then. Kessler Group is establishing an in-house consulting division focused on operational excellence and strategic growth. We're tired of paying external firms millions for inconsistent results dependent on whoever they assign to our account." She took a sip of her wine. "We want you to build and lead it." I nearly choked on my water. "I'm sorry. Dad and I have discussed this for months, actually. Your removal from our account simply accelerated the timeline. We want you to bring your expertise in-house, build a team, and take over what Pinnacle has been doing. Only better, more consistently, and with complete alignment to our goals." My mind raced with possibilities. This wasn't just a job offer. It was the opportunity to create something from the ground up, to implement my vision without the constraints of traditional consulting politics. "What exactly would this role entail?" I asked, buying time to gather my thoughts. "Title would be Chief Strategy Officer, reporting directly to the board. You'd start by focusing on the areas where we currently use Pinnacle, then gradually expand as you build your team. Compensation package would include base salary, performance bonuses, and equity options. She slid a folder across the table. All the details are in here. Take a few days to review. I opened the folder and nearly gasped at the salary figure, almost double what I'd been making at Pinnacle. This is generous, I managed. Sophia waved dismissively. It's less than we're currently paying Pinnacle for the privilege of dealing with people who don't understand our business half as well as you do. The equity alone will be worth millions if you hit the growth targets we know you can achieve. And what about the current contract with Pinnacle? A slow, calculating smile spread across Sophia's face. That's the interesting part. The Master Services Agreement has a clause allowing termination with 30 days' notice if there's a significant change in key personnel. Dad insisted on it after our previous consulting firm switched our account manager 3 times in 1 year. The implication was clear. My removal constituted exactly such a change. Our contract with Pinnacle is worth approximately $500 million over 5 years, Sophia continued, which they're about to lose because Richard Donovan wanted to give his cousin a plum assignment. The poetic justice wasn't lost on me. Still, a lifetime in professional environments had taught me to proceed with caution. I'd need some time to think about this, I said. It's a significant change. Of course, we're prepared to wait a week for your decision. Sophia raised her glass. To new beginnings, whatever you decide. I left dinner that night with my head spinning. The offer was incredible, better than anything I could have hoped for so soon after being fired. But beyond the compensation and title, what truly tempted me was the chance to show Richard and Pinnacle exactly what they'd thrown away. The next morning, I called my former colleague and friend Lisa Chen, who had left Pinnacle a year earlier to start her own boutique consulting firm. They fired you? Lisa exclaimed after I explained my situation. Richard is an even bigger idiot than I thought. The question is, am I an idiot for considering this Kessler offer? I asked, outlining the proposal. Lisa whistled. That's not just a lifeboat, Audrey. That's a luxury yacht pulling up while you're still within swimming distance of the shore. Take it. But building an internal consulting division from scratch is exactly what you're brilliant at, Lisa interrupted. Systems, processes, identifying the right talent. It's what made you so good with clients. Besides, this isn't just a great opportunity. This is the universe handing you the perfect revenge on a silver platter. She wasn't wrong. The thought of walking into Pinnacle as Kessler's representative to terminate their contract carried a certain delicious irony. Wouldn't that be burning bridges, though? I asked, the last remnants of corporate caution still lingering. Lisa laughed. Honey, Richard already napalmed that bridge when he fired you to hire his cousin. This isn't about revenge. It's about showing your true value. Pinnacle didn't appreciate you. Kessler does. By the end of our conversation, my decision was made. I called Sophia that afternoon and accepted the position. Within a week, I had signed the contracts, moved into a temporary office at Kessler headquarters, and begun planning my new division. 2 weeks after being unceremoniously fired, I was sitting in a corner office with a view of Lake Michigan, reviewing Pinnacle's contract with the Kessler legal team. This termination clause is airtight, the head counsel confirmed. They can't contest it. We'll send the notice tomorrow. I nodded, a mix of professional satisfaction and personal vindication coursing through me. I should be the one to deliver it in person. The lawyer raised an eyebrow. That's not necessary from a legal standpoint. It's necessary from a relationship standpoint, I countered smoothly. I've worked with these people for years. They deserve the courtesy of hearing this directly rather than just receiving a letter. What I didn't say was that I wanted to see Richard's face when he realized what had happened. Perhaps that was petty, but after the humiliation of being marched out with my belongings in a box, I felt entitled to a moment of righteous satisfaction. Martin Kessler approved my request with a knowing smile. Just remember, Audrey, this isn't about settling scores. It's about doing what's best for Kessler Group. Of course, I agreed, though we both knew there was more to it than that. The stage was set. In just 3 weeks, I had gone from unemployed to holding the power to deliver a $500 million blow to the company that had discarded me. Now it was time to return to Pinnacle Ventures, not as a desperate former employee, but as their biggest client's new chief strategy officer. The Pinnacle Ventures lobby hadn't changed in the 3 weeks since I'd left. Same modern artwork that cost more than most employees' annual salaries. Same uncomfortable designer chairs that prioritized aesthetics over function. Same receptionists with their polite, practiced smiles. What had changed was me. I walked in wearing a tailored black suit I'd purchased with my generous signing bonus, my visitor badge clipped to my lapel instead of the employee ID that had hung around my neck for 6 years. My former colleagues did double takes as I passed, whispers following in my wake. "Is that Audrey? What is she doing here? Did you hear where she landed?" I smiled politely but kept walking. Today wasn't about reconnecting. It was about business. Richard's assistant blanched when she saw me approaching. "Ms. Bennett, I don't think Mr. Donovan is expecting you. He's expecting representatives from Kessler Group," I replied smoothly. "I'm here in that capacity. We have a 10 a.m. meeting scheduled." Confusion flickered across her face before comprehension dawned. "Oh, I'll let him know you're here." I could hear muffled exclamations from behind Richard's door before she returned, visibly flustered. "He'll see you now." Richard was standing when I entered, his face an impressive study in conflicting emotions. Shock, confusion, and the beginning stages of alarm. Beside him sat a younger man with similar features, whom I assumed was the infamous cousin Daniel. "Audrey," Richard managed, his voice carefully controlled. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" I took a seat without waiting for an invitation, placing my briefcase on his desk. "I believe Kessler Group informed you they'd be sending representatives to discuss the contract today." Daniel leaned forward, extending his hand. "Daniel Donovan, I don't think we've had the pleasure." I shook his hand briefly. "Audrey Bennett, Chief Strategy Officer for Kessler Group." The title landed like a grenade in the room. Richard's complexion paled visibly. "Chief Strategy? When did this happen?" he asked. "Shortly after you terminated my employment," I replied, maintaining a pleasant, professional tone. "Martin and Sophia Kessler approached me with an opportunity I couldn't refuse. Part of my new role involves overseeing all external consulting relationships." I opened my briefcase and removed a folder, sliding it across the desk. "Which brings me to the purpose of today's meeting. This is formal notice of termination of our master services agreement, effective 30 days from today, per Section 12.3 regarding changes in key personnel." Richard stared at the document as if it might bite him. "This is absurd. We've been Kessler's trusted advisors for years." "Yes, we established that trust," I said, emphasizing the "we" ever so slightly. "Unfortunately, Kessler Group has decided to take their strategic consulting needs in a different direction." Daniel, to his credit, seemed to grasp the situation faster than his cousin. "This is about your removal from the account." I turned to him with a professionally neutral expression. Kessler Group values consistency and deep institutional knowledge in their advisors. When I was unexpectedly removed from their account, it triggered a reassessment of the relationship. I paused before adding, "Your presentation on their supply chain strategy didn't help matters." Richard's face flushed. "This is completely unprofessional. You've obviously poisoned the client against us." "Richard?" I interrupted calmly. "Martin Kessler has been doing business longer than either of us. Do you really think he'd terminate a $500 million contract out of personal loyalty to me? This is a business decision based on Kessler Group's strategic priorities, which you're now magically in charge of," he scoffed. "Yes," I confirmed simply, "because they value my approach to their business challenges." Daniel cleared his throat. "Perhaps we could arrange a meeting with Mr. Kessler to address his concerns." "That won't be necessary," I replied. "The decision has been made. We'll be transitioning all current projects to our internal team over the next 30 days. I'll need complete access to all Kessler-related files, of course." The irony of echoing Richard's dismissive, "the decision has been made" phrase back to him wasn't lost on anyone in the room. His jaw tightened as he recognized his own words. "This isn't over," Richard said, his voice low with barely contained anger. "Our legal team will review this termination notice." I smiled politely. "They'll find it's completely in order. Now, shall we discuss the transition plan? Or would you prefer to involve your leadership team first?" Before Richard could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at it, his expression darkening further. "It's the CEO," he muttered to Daniel before answering. "Yes, sir. Yes, she's here now. I understand. We'll be right there." He hung up and stood abruptly. "The CEO wants to meet with us immediately. All of us," he added, looking pointedly at me. "Of course," I agreed, gathering my things. "Lead the way." As we walked through the office toward the executive floor, I could feel the weight of stares from my former colleagues. Some looked confused, others curious, and a few, those who had witnessed my unceremonious departure, seemed quietly satisfied at this unexpected turn of events. The CEO's corner office was exactly as imposing as it was designed to be, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the Chicago skyline. James Porter had been running Pinnacle for over a decade, growing it from a mid-sized consulting firm to one of the top players in the industry. I'd only been in his presence a handful of times throughout my tenure. "Audrey," he greeted me with a firm handshake, his expression unreadable. "Quite a remarkable career pivot you've made. Please, sit down." As Richard and Daniel took seats on one side of the conference table, I sat opposite them, maintaining the physical separation that reflected our new professional reality. "I've just gotten off the phone with Martin Kessler," James continued, remaining standing. "He was quite direct about Kessler Group's decision to terminate our services and bring their strategic consulting in-house under your leadership." Richard shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I believe we can still salvage." James held up a hand, silencing him. "Martin made it very clear that their decision is final. He also made it clear why." His gaze fixed on Richard. "He specifically cited your removal of Audrey from their account as the catalyst for their reassessment." The CEO turned to me. "Congratulations on your new position, Audrey. A significant achievement." "Thank you," I replied simply. "Now," James continued, "given that this appears to be irreversible, I'd like to discuss how we can ensure a smooth transition for Kessler Group. Despite this unfortunate development, I want to maintain as much goodwill as possible. They remain a significant market player, and paths have a way of crossing again in this industry." For the next hour, we hammered out the details of the transition. James was pragmatic, Richard was sullen, and Daniel was largely silent, likely realizing that his promising new role had just imploded before it truly began. Throughout the meeting, I maintained strict professionalism, focusing on what was best for Kessler Group rather than any personal satisfaction. But I couldn't help noticing how the power dynamic had shifted. 3 weeks ago, I'd been dismissed from this very building, my career seemingly in tatters. Now I was dictating terms to the company that had discarded me. As the meeting concluded, James walked me to the elevator, leaving Richard and Daniel behind. "Off the record," he said quietly as we waited. "This could have been avoided." "Yes," I agreed. "It could have. Richard made a serious error in judgment. Rest assured it's being addressed." The elevator arrived, and he held the door. "The business world is smaller than people realize, Audrey. I suspect our paths will cross again under better circumstances." "I look forward to it," I replied sincerely. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a final glimpse of the office where I'd spent so many years of my life. There was a moment of nostalgia, quickly replaced by anticipation for the challenges ahead. 6 months later, I stood at the podium in Kessler Group's main conference room, presenting the quarterly results of our newly established Strategic Initiatives Division. The room was packed with executives, board members, and my growing team of 15 consultants, many of whom I'd recruited from Pinnacle after word spread about what had happened. "In summary," I concluded, advancing to my final slide, "the transition from external consulting to our in-house model has resulted in a 32% cost reduction, while improving implementation speed by 47%. Our European expansion is 2 months ahead of schedule, and preliminary results from our Asian market assessment indicate potential for even greater growth than initially projected. Martin Kessler, sitting at the center of the boardroom table, nodded approvingly. Exceptional work, Audrey. I think I speak for the entire board when I say this has exceeded our most optimistic expectations. Sophia, now splitting her time between London and Chicago as we expanded the European operations, smiled knowingly. She had championed my unconventional onboarding from the beginning, convincing skeptical board members that bringing me in wasn't just about rescuing their strategic initiatives after the Pinnacle debacle, it was about transforming how Kessler approached their entire business. After the presentation, as executives filed out, Martin pulled me aside. "Walk with me," he suggested, leading the way to the rooftop garden that crowned the Kessler building. It was a beautiful spring day, the Chicago skyline stretching out before us. "Do you know why I insisted on this garden when we renovated the building?" he asked, gesturing to the carefully maintained green space. "I assumed for sustainability credentials," I replied. He chuckled. "Partly. But mainly because I've found that the best decisions aren't made in boardrooms. They're made in spaces that allow for perspective." He turned to face me. "6 months ago, you made a life-changing decision after being treated unfairly. How do you feel about it now?" I considered the question carefully. "Grateful," I finally said. "Not just for the opportunity, but for the push I needed to step outside my comfort zone. I might have stayed at Pinnacle for years, never knowing what I was capable of building." Martin nodded. "Adversity reveals character. When Richard removed you from our account, he revealed his, prioritizing nepotism over merit. When you built something better rather than just seeking revenge, you revealed yours." "I won't pretend there wasn't satisfaction in that meeting at Pinnacle," I admitted. "Of course there was," Martin laughed. "You're human. But you didn't let that satisfaction become your purpose. That's why you're succeeding now." He gestured toward the skyline. "Pinnacle's building is over there, isn't it?" I followed his gaze to the glass tower where I'd spent so many years. "Yes, just east of the river." "Did you know they lost 3 more major clients after Kessler?" This was news to me. "No, I hadn't heard. Word travels fast in our circles. Richard was demoted last month. Apparently, the board held him responsible for what they're calling the Kessler catastrophe." I felt a complicated mix of emotions, a twinge of sympathy for former colleagues whose jobs might be affected, satisfaction that Richard had faced consequences, but mostly a sense of detachment. That world felt increasingly distant from my new reality. "I didn't know," I repeated. "I've been focused on building our division." "Exactly as you should be," Martin approved. "The past makes poor foundation material. Better to use it as a reference point than as building blocks." As we completed our circuit of the garden, he added, "The board has approved the expansion of your division. You'll have budget for another 20 hires this year. Sophia tells me you have plans for a technology integration team?" "Yes," I confirmed, excitement building as I outlined my vision for combining strategic consulting with cutting-edge technology solutions, something Pinnacle had been reluctant to explore despite my repeated proposals. Later that evening, I sat in my new lakefront condo, reflecting on the whirlwind of the past 6 months. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa, who had become a valuable partner, her boutique firm now handling specialized projects for Kessler under my division's umbrella. "Drinks to celebrate the board approval? I'm buying." I smiled and texted back my agreement. As I got ready to meet her, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror and paused, struck by how different I looked from the woman who had walked out of Pinnacle with a box of belongings half a year ago. It wasn't just the more expensive clothes or the confident posture. It was the look of someone who had found her true path. My phone buzzed again, an email notification from LinkedIn. "Richard Donovan has viewed your profile." I laughed softly to myself and set the phone down without opening the app. Let him look. Let him wonder how things might have been different if he'd valued merit over favoritism. I no longer needed to prove anything to Richard or Pinnacle. The $500 million contract had been just the beginning. The division I was building would soon oversee billions in strategic initiatives across multiple continents. What had begun as an unjust firing had transformed into the opportunity of a lifetime. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting ahead. And that's exactly what I had done. As I stepped out into the Chicago evening, I felt nothing but gratitude for the unexpected twist of fate that had forced me to discover my true worth. Not as someone else's employee, but as the architect of my own success.